Understanding balance sheets EOC questions, starting with question number 1. It says, resources controlled by a company as a result of past events. Resources controlled, not necessarily owned, are called assets. So we need to look no further. B is the right answer. Assets are the resources controlled by a company as a result of past events. Next. Equity equals what? We know the formula. Assets is equal to liabilities plus equity. If we make equity the subject of the equation, assets minus liabilities. It's two simple questions you might see in your elementary accounting. Nonetheless, it's your EOC, gentlemen. So equity is equal to assets minus liabilities. So that makes A to be your correct option. Next. Distinguishing between your current and non-current items on the balance sheet and presenting subtotals for current assets and liabilities is referred to what type of balance sheet? Classified balance sheet. We just discussed a little while earlier. This is classified balance sheet. An unclassified balance sheet does not provide any subclassification. It simply lists all normal line items on balance sheet in their order of liquidity and simply presents the total, so no classification is done. Liquidity-based balance sheet is exactly the same. A liquidity-based balance sheet broadly presents all the assets and liabilities in order of liquidity. So when you say the classification is done based on the current and non-current items, so we're talking about a classified balance sheet. Without doubt, A is the right answer. Moving on. Shareholders' equity reported on the balance sheet is most likely to differ from the market value of shareholders' equity because the equity value reported on the balance sheet will be different than the market value of the shareholder equity. What is the reason? A. Historical cost basis is used for all assets and liabilities. This is not true. No doubt in US GAAP, property, plant and equipment, most of it are measured at historical cost, but not all assets are reported at historical cost. Right? This is not true. Some factors that affect the generation of future cash are excluded from the balance sheet, from equity. This is true because company may have more profit generating capacity in the future, may have more projects in line that might generate more EPS in the future. This hasn't yet been factored in to your equity because it cannot be done under the current US GAAP. So it is done by analysts. So this is the reason why the equity reported on the balance sheet might be different than the equity calculated by the analyst. Book value per share will be different than the market value per share because the market value considers the future cash generation by the firms from future activities. This is the reason why there could be a difference. Right? So the first one is wrong because historical cost is one of the bases. There are many other bases we use for measuring different types of assets. Shareholders' equity reported on the balance sheet is updated continuously. Now this is a debatable term. Continuously, this is not right. There is no dynamic balance sheet that keeps on changing every day as the day passes. Yes, they are updated, but only on the reporting date. The reporting period could be quarterly, could be biannually, could be yearly, or even could be monthly, but it is not done on continuous basis. So the correct option is B. This is the right way of doing MCQs. Please do not just select the correct option and move on. You should spend some time when you're practicing yourself. You should spend some time on the incorrect options to convince yourself why they are wrong. This way you have not done one question, you have done 3 questions. Right? So B is the right answer. Next. The information provided by balance sheet item is limited because uncertainty regarding what? It says the information on the balance sheet has limited utility because of uncertainty regarding what? Measurement of its cost or value with reliability. Wrong. Many items are measured at different bases for reliability. We measure some items at historical cost, some at market value, some at NRV, just in order to make our financial information more reliable. So this is wrong, that because we are reporting at cost, so make it unreliable. This is incorrect. There are many items that are measured at different bases, just for the purpose of reliability. This is a wrong statement. The change in current value following the end of the reporting period. Now, this is the problem. Let's say your balance sheet has been prepared for 31st of December 2020. After a month, or maybe after a couple of months, some event has happened or some transactions have been entered into, and they might totally change the composition of your balance sheet. So the change in current value following the end of reporting period, when the balance sheet date is over, things change. And unfortunately, that's a necessity as well, because balance sheet has to be prepared at a particular point in time. Things can change considerably after a certain period of time. So unfortunately, we can't incorporate these changes in the balance sheet at the end of 31st of December 2020 unless that event is an adjusting event and financial statement has not yet been approved for publication. Otherwise, that's a drawback also, that immediately after the balance sheet date, things can change the total composition of your balance sheet. That's the limitation. It further says the probability that many future economic benefits will flow to or from an entity. Yes, we take many items that are probable, but it's not a limitation. Items are recorded only if it is probable that some economic benefit will flow to the organization representing an asset, or it will flow some economic benefits from the organization representing a liability. Right? So only those items are recognized that will either result in an inflow of economic benefit or an outflow of economic benefit. It's not a limitation. This is the limitation, that after the balance sheet date, things can drastically change the composition of your balance sheet. That's the limitation B. Which of the following is most likely classified as a current liability? Current liability. Payment received for a product due to be delivered at least 1 year after the balance sheet date. 1 year after the balance sheet date, it's a non-current liability because the settlement is being done or the product is being delivered after 1 year. It's a non-current liability. Incorrect. Payments for merchandise due at least 1 year after the balance sheet date, but still within the normal operating cycle. Since it's within the operating cycle, or 1 year, whichever is longer, so if it is to be delivered within the operating cycle, so this criteria determines whether an asset or a liability is current or non-current. A year or the operating cycle, whichever is longer. If a liability is to be settled within 12 months or operating cycle, whichever is longer, or if an asset is used up, converted to cash, if that is done within 1 year operating cycle, whichever longer, that is current asset. Since this merchandise is to be delivered within the operating cycle, so it is a current asset. It is the liability against it is the current liability because it is within 1 year operating cycle, whichever is longer. So that makes B to be the correct current liability because it has to be settled within the normal operating cycle. Why not C? Payment on debt due in 6 months, apparently a current liability, because a liability which is to be settled within 6 months is a current liability for which the company has the unconditional right to defer settlement for at least 1 year after the balance sheet date. See, if you just look at this, you might say it's a current liability, but since the company has unconditional right to delay the payment for more than 1 year, since company is most likely to exercise this right, so we can classify it as a non-current liability. But this one, within the normal operating cycle, it's a current liability. That makes B to be the correct option. Next, the most likely company to use liquidity-based balance sheet presentation is a bank. A liquidity-based presentation may be used by financial institutions such as banks. A computer manufacturer will use a classified one. Software company with trade receivables and payables will report a classified one. Normally for banking institutions, the liquidity base is more reliable and more relevant. So that makes A to be the correct option. Next, all of the following are current assets. Cash, current asset. Inventory is current asset. Goodwill is not a current asset. It's an intangible, long-lived asset, and it arises only in the case of acquisition. Internally generated goodwill is not reported. The most likely cost included in both the cost of inventory and property, plant and equipment are selling cost. Selling cost is a period cost. It is incurred as an expense in the period it is incurred. Storage cost, it is considered as a period cost. If it is storage for, this is a very fine point, normally CMAs would know, a storage cost specifically incurred for raw material, it is considered as a part of product cost or the cost of inventory. But storage cost for the finished goods, the goods are completed, then it is considered as a period cost. But since it doesn't require this much in-depth knowledge regarding cost management, which is a specific domain of CMAs, so selling cost is considered as a period cost, considered as an expense in which it is incurred. Storage cost for you people is a period cost. We don't go into that deep bifurcation where we split storage into material and the finished goods. Yes, this is something that you should know. Delivery cost is capitalized. In case of raw material, when you purchase the raw material, the cost paid for delivery, which you call the carriage inward, it is capitalized or added to the cost of material. Like we bought goods worth 10,000 and we paid $500 for transportation in. For these purchased goods, it will be 10,500. The cost of material will be 10,500. Likewise, you purchase a plant from Germany and it required you to pay the transportation cost of 5,000 euros. This cost will be added to the cost of plant. Remember, the delivery cost for raw materials or even finished goods, delivery cost, mind the word delivery cost. The delivery cost for property, plant and equipment and inventory is capitalized in inventory and in property, plant and equipment, because this is required as per the IS 16 property, plant and equipment, as well as IS 2 inventories. So that is not to be debated right now. We'll discuss in separate readings, long-lived assets and your inventories. So remember, the delivery cost is capitalized in raw materials acquisition and property, plant and equipment. That makes C to be the correct option. Debt due within 1 year is considered current. Yes, within 1 year or operating cycle, whichever is greater or longer. Correct. This is the right option. Why not B? You need to have a good reason. Preferred, it's a stock class. Preferred stock, redeemable preferred stock, convertible preferred stock. Convertible, it's a feature. So this doesn't determine another, it's not a current liability. Preferred stock is a class of stock, and convertibility is a feature that might be attached to a bond or a preferred stock that is convertible to a certain number of common shares we discussed in our EPS calculation. So this is the debt to be paid within 1 year, and it's a current liability. A is the right answer. Money received from customers for products to be delivered in the future is recorded as. Now here accountants come in action. When you receive money from our customer, please do not go for these entries. They are not examinable. This is the specific purview from point of view in accounting. An accountant's perspective, when we receive money from our customers for which nothing has yet been delivered or no service has yet been provided, it's an advance from customer. You debit bank and you credit advances from customer, right? This is debited and this is credited. We cannot consider this as revenue. Yes, there is an asset, but Mafi revenue. It's an asset, yes. Bank is an asset, correct? And advance which you have received from customer is a liability. It's an asset and liability. So money received from our customers for which no good or service has been provided, we debit bank, credit advance. When the goods and services have been provided, we will make another entry to reverse the effect. We will remove this advance, now debit advance from customers and credit the revenue for which the money was received. So this account will be cancelled out. But right now we just need to tell that we have received the money, debit bank, and credit the liability. That makes B to be the correct option. Next, an example of contra asset. Contra asset, contra asset, contra asset, contra asset. Keep that word in mind because you will lose the focus. The highlighting option in your CBT will be very helpful. This is the keyword that you must highlight because you might lose the focus while reading these options. Contra asset is the word. Depreciation expense. It's an expense. Accumulated depreciation, where we keep on piling up our depreciation every year. Yes, this is a contra asset. Absolutely, it's a contra asset. Why? Because it is shown as a deduction from your cost of the asset. But here the word is depreciation expense, not accumulated depreciation. And this is the reason this is the wrong option. Sales return and allowances. Yes. Sales return and allowances, they are contra accounts. Yes, they are, but they are netted off against revenue. Sales minus sales returns and allowances, it's a contra account, but it's a contra sale account. It's not a contra asset. This is the key word, contra asset. Then we have allowances for doubtful debts. We just told you that the account receivables are reported at NRV, that is your gross receivables, minus allowance for uncollectible accounts. This allowance for uncollectible account, it's a contra asset. Why? Because gross receivable is your asset. An account, this allowance for uncollectible account, this is a contra asset account showing your gross receivables at NRV. Likewise, your historical cost based property, plant and equipment, we deduct accumulated depreciation from the cost of property, plant and equipment. So this accumulated depreciation, yes, it's a contra asset. Allowance for uncollectible account, yes, it's a contra asset, right? But rest of them, these were contra sales. So that makes C to be the correct option. And that makes C to be the right option. Next, the carrying value of inventories reflects what? Do we take our inventories at historical cost? Yes. Do we take our inventories at current values? Yes, in some circumstances. Then what should be the right result? Lower of cost or NRV, which intakes the current value. I told you there are separate treatments of inventories under US GAAP and IFRS. US GAAP has two treatments, LCM rule and NRV rule. They are treated separately for different valuation based inventory. But under the IFRS, you just have NRV versus cost, whichever is lower. And in this LCM rule, gentlemen, yes, current value is there. So under US GAAP, historical cost could be the base, current value could be the base. But this one is the most appropriate one, historical cost or NRV, because this is applicable in most of the inventory valuations. So we'll see it detail in our separate reading relating to inventory. So right now, C is the right answer. We'll deliberate upon these in detail later on. When a company pays its rent in advance, when you pay rent in advance, what entry do you make? You debit prepaid rent. I hope everyone has gone through the basic accounting. Prepaid rent, debit, and bank credit. Prepaid rent, it is reported as other assets on your balance sheet within the current assets. So prepaid rent is an asset and it's increasing. Since you have paid rent in advance, your bank is decreasing, another asset is decreasing. So an asset is increasing, prepaid rent, and another asset is decreasing. So there is an asset involved, Mafi liability. Asset, yes, Mafi shareholder equity. One category of asset is increasing, other category of asset decreasing. This is perfect, perfectly right. It will reflect a reduction in your bank and an increase in the prepaid rent. That makes C to be the correct option. Accrued expenses and accrued liabilities are what? Accrued expenses are the expenses that have been incurred but haven't yet been paid. Salary due, wages due, rent due, insurance due, many expenses. They are due, they have been incurred but haven't yet been paid. They are called accrued expenses or accrued liabilities. They are created when another liability is reduced. Wrong. They are created when they have been incurred and to be charged on the income statement but have not yet been paid. Expenses that have been reported on the income statement but not yet paid are called accrued expenses. Right, so next, that's C. Moving on to the next question, number 16. The initial measurement of goodwill is most likely affected by. This is the formula we use to calculate the goodwill. Goodwill is equal to consideration paid. Consideration could be bonds, shares, cash, or combination thereof. Consideration paid plus fair value of non-controlling interest at the date of acquisition minus fair value of the assets at acquisition minus fair value of liabilities at the acquisition. This is how goodwill is determined. And one very fine point, maybe you need it later. If the result of this formula is positive, please note it down. If the result of this formula is positive, goodwill is considered as an intangible asset on the parent's consolidated balance sheet. If the result of this formula is positive, goodwill is reported as an intangible long-lived asset on the parent's consolidated balance sheet. If the result is negative, means you paid less and acquired more of an asset, means the fair value of net assets was more than the amount you paid. This represents a gain, and this is reported as a gain on the income statement of consolidated company. Consolidated income statement. The fine point, maybe you need it somewhere. So remember, this is a formula. If the result is positive, it's an intangible asset to be reported on the group's consolidated balance sheet. If its result is negative, it's a gain to be reported on the consolidated income statement. Fine. That's an added gyan for goodwill. It says initial measurement of goodwill is most likely affected by what? An acquisition purchase price, which I called as consideration paid. Yes, consideration paid is the purchase price, and it is a very much part of the goodwill computation formula. Do we see the book value? Acquired company's book value, Mafi book value. There is no book value anywhere in this formula. No book value at all. The fair value, yes, of the acquirer, mind the word, acquirer, the company that acquires another company, the one who is the company that is taking over. The fair value of the acquired assets and liability would have made it a right option, but the word here is acquirer, so you have to be very clear, very careful. That's how the examiner can dodge you. You will definitely click C. Fair value is a part of this, so you might click C, but this is wrong. It's acquirer's assets and liabilities. We're looking for the acquired fair value of assets and fair value. This makes this option wrong. So the correct option is the purchase price. That's a part of your goodwill, and it is the right option. A is it. Next, defining total assets turnover as revenue divided by average total assets, that is sales divided by average total assets. ATA, I'm writing it for short. All else equal, impairing a write-down of long-lived assets. Impairment is also a part of your long-lived assets. Impairment is done differently under the US GAAP. Impairment losses calculated differently under the IFRS. All is coming. Just hold on. Everything will be discussed. So impairment of long-lived assets under the IFRS and the US GAAP, they're different. Let's say it's an impairment. This impairment will do what? This impairment of the long-lived assets owned by the company will most likely result in increase for the company's debt to equity and assets turnover. This is your assets turnover formula, and debt to equity means debt upon equity. Now please gentlemen, this is how you do the ratio formulas. This is the technique we use and you should use. Since there is an impairment of the long-lived asset, impairment means the assets turnover denominator, average total assets, will fall. When the average total assets will fall, the denominator of this ratio will fall because of the impairment write-down. How the impairment is recorded? We debit the impairment loss, credit to the accumulated depreciation. This accumulated depreciation reduces the book value of the assets. Average total assets will fall. Because of the lowered denominator, the ratio would improve. Or not improve, I would say, it grew up. Likewise, since you have charged an impairment loss, this impairment loss is a loss, and loss is a loss. This loss will be charged against your net income, which eventually becomes a part of equity. Equity reduces. Since the equity is going down, lower denominator will result in higher debt to equity ratio. Now we are absolutely sure, because of an impairment write-down, your assets turnover would increase. Why? Because the denominator is decreasing. And your debt to equity ratio would increase as well because the denominator is falling. So which option should we do? The debt to equity ratio would increase, but not the total asset turnover. Wrong. Total asset turnover would increase because the word here is increase, but not the debt to equity ratio. Wrong. Now read the whole statement. The write down by the company will most likely result in an increase in both the debt to equity ratio and the total assets turnover. Both will increase. Now we are absolutely sure through the formula, by changing the denominator, that both ratio would increase, and absolutely right answer C. Next, A company has total liabilities of 35 million and a total shareholders equity of 55 million. The total liabilities are represented on a vertical common size balance sheet as a percentage closest to what? We know liabilities and equity are the other side of the balance sheet. Liabilities are reported as 35 million, equity is 55. So the total of these will be 90 million. So when we express them as a on percentages basis, so the base is 90, not 100. So when you take 90 as a base and express 35 as a percentage of 90, 35 by 90 gives you 39%. And 55, which is equity, it is what percent of the total? Balance sheet total. 55 by 90, or you can simply deduct 39 from 100, 61%. Right? So now, what is total liability represented in the vertical common size? 39%. Do not just go by straight 35, it's 35 million plus 55, a total balance sheet footing is 90 million. So 35 is what percentage of 90? It's 39%. So that makes B to be the correct option. B it is. Next. For financial assets, bonds, etc., securities which have been classified as trading security, held for trading, HFT, mark to market, how are unrealized gains and losses reflected? You purchase certain securities and you designated them on the date of purchase as a trading security for $10,000, and at the balance sheet date, they could either go up or down. Let's say they have fair value of $12,000 at the balance sheet date. Now, this increase is unrealized, of course, because we haven't yet sold. This increase in value is unrealized, and it's an unrealized gain. Where do we report it? We just discussed. It's reported as a part of income. They are not recognized. Wrong. They flow through the income into retained earnings. Yes, they are considered as a part of income, and from income they go into retained earnings. See, he may play with you through words. They flow through the income. And what is income? Income statement. Into the retained earnings. Correct. They are component of accumulated other comprehensive income. No. Had they been available for sale debt securities or available for sale redeemable preferred stock, in that case any change in the fair value would have gone through the other comprehensive income. This is wrong. So that makes B to be the correct option, and B it is. For financial assets classified as available for sale, yes. How are the unrealized gains and losses reflected in the shareholders' equity? They are not recognized. Wrong. They flew through the retained earnings. No, that is for the held for trading. They are a component of accumulated other comprehensive income. Yes, any fair value gain loss, unrealized one, goes to the part of other comprehensive income we discussed in detail. So remember, available for sale debt securities or redeemable preferred stock, it is reported as, if reported as AFS, any gain and loss would go to the other comprehensive income. Next, for financial assets classified as held to maturity, how are unrealized gains and losses reflected in the shareholders' equity? We discussed this a little while ago. Those securities, of course, held to maturity can only be bonds. Held to maturity, how are they treated? How are unrealized gains and losses reflected on the shareholders' equity? If the bond price goes up and down, no impact upon your income statement at all. Why? Because they are reported at amortized cost. When they are reported at amortized cost, any change in their fair value, we are least concerned. Why? Because they have been designated as held to maturity. Organization has positive intention to hold on to them till they mature. So they are reported at amortized cost, and their fair value may go up and down. They are any change in the unrealized gain and losses or fair value, they are not recognized. Remember, they are reported at the amortized cost, and any fair value change is not recognized. That makes A to be the correct option. Next, a non-controlling interest. This is the new name. This was the old one, minority interest. We used to use about 12 years ago, 15 years ago, but this is the term used, non-controlling interest. You purchase 70% stock of the company, 30% which you couldn't buy or which you intentionally, unintentionally, this is called non-controlling interest. The interest, and you hold the controlling interest. So how do we report the non-controlling interest in the consolidated subsidiaries balance sheet? I told you a little while ago, it is reported within the shareholders' equity as a separate part. Just like we report our treasury stock separately as an unallocated reduction. So this non-controlling interest is reported within the shareholders equity section. Statement change in equity. So this is the right option. Now this is a little twisted. Most of you will click because the word looks good. As a mezzanine item between liabilities and shareholders equity. That's something between these liabilities and equity. Absolutely wrong. It is reported as a part of equity within the statement of change in equity. So this is the wrong statement. Correct one is B. The item retained earnings is component of what? Retained earning is not an asset. It's not a liability. Retained earning is a part of stockholders' equity or shareholder equity. Retained earning, other comprehensive income accumulated, common stock, additional contributed capital, any additional general reserve created for certain, or any debenture redemption reserve or dividend equalization reserve, any subcomponents of equity, they are reported in the balance sheet. So retained earning is one of those components. So this is clearly C. When a company buys shares of its own stock to be held in treasury, when a company purchases its own stock from the market, it records a reduction in what? First of all, just a little idea. When you purchase a stock, you have paid. What did you get? You bought your own stock. You can't report it as an asset. You debit treasury stock, you credit bank. So yes, your asset goes down, bank is reduced. This is a debit item. So we know debit could either be an asset, which it is not, or an expense, which it is not. Interesting. It is neither an expense nor an asset, but it's a debit item. Treasury stock is debit. Either it has to be an asset or it has to be an expense. But since they are our own stock which we purchased, we neither report them as an asset nor could it be an expense. They are reported as an unallocated reduction from equity, a negative item in the equity. Right? So how it is recorded? Both asset and liability. It does affect our asset. Asset is reduced, but it is not a liability. Both assets, yes, asset is reduced and it is reported as a negative item in shareholder equity. That's the right option. B is the right option. Asset, yes, increase in shareholder equity, must increase. Buying your own stock is a negative item. It decreases the shareholder's equity. Remember, the treasury stock is reported as a negative item and it is shown as an unallocated reduction in the equity. There is another treatment also, but that's not the subject of today's agenda. That makes B to be the correct option, an asset and also a reduction in shareholder equity. B is the right answer. Which of the following would an analyst most likely be able to determine from a common size analysis of a company's balance sheet over several periods? Definitely is talking about the horizontal common size analysis. An increase in or decrease in sales. Remember, your common size financial statements or balance sheets, they are on comparative terms. Since we are talking about the common size horizontal analysis, and he didn't say specifically, see, it's a balance sheet. An increase or decrease in sales, first of all, we are talking about the balance sheet, and second, we are talking about the common size one, so we cannot go for dollar amounts. And he's asking for sales. Sales is a part of your income statement, so you would need to look at the common size income statement, not balance sheet. Wrong. And moreover, common size financial statements, they give you comparative measure, either the percentage of sales or the percentage of balance sheet totals, right? So they are not in the dollar terms. That totally rejects option A. An increase or decrease in the financial leverage from the common size balance sheet over the year for 2020, 2021, 2022. You can see the composition of your balance sheet financing side. So definitely it will help you calculate the financial leverage, whether it has increased or decreased. That is possible. More efficient or less efficient use of assets. Since it's on comparative basis, so we cannot draw any conclusion based upon the dollar amounts, right? This is possible through common size balance sheet drawn horizontally, but not A and C, so that makes B to be the correct option. An investor concerned whether a company can meet its near-term obligation is most likely to calculate the liquidity ratio. Current ratio is a liquidity ratio. Return on capital, it's a profitability ratio. Financial leverage ratio is a leverage ratio. So since we are interested in the company's ability to pay its current obligation, it's a current ratio we're talking about, A. the most stringent test of company's liquidity. Current ratio is very lax one. Little stringent is the quick ratio, also called the acid test ratio. More stringent one is the cash ratio. Cash ratio is the most stringent one, the most conservative one. So the most conservative test or the stringent test of company's liquidity is excluding your inventories, your prepayments, your account receivables. Take only cash and marketable securities to determine your liquidity. This is cash ratio. It's the most conservative one. A. An investor's worried about a company's long-term solvency. Long-term solvency. Current ratio measures liquidity. Rejected. Return on equity, it's a profitability measure. Rejected. Yes, debt to equity is one of the solvency measures we discussed a little while earlier. C. Using the information presented in Exhibit 4, giving right to this right of the screen, the quick ratio for SAP group. Quick ratio. Quick ratio takes in cash, financial assets, trade receivables, cash and cash equivalents, yes. Other financial assets, yes. This one also. When it says non-financial assets, definitely they are talking about inventories and prepayments. They must be excluded. Tax assets also are irrelevant and not likely to be considered as current assets. So it's 4011, 990 and 5899. Divide it with the current liability, and current liability is given here as 10,210. So adding all these up in the numerator, dividing with 10,210, your quick assets have been considered, excluding the others that are not likely to be converted into cash. Non-financial assets and tax assets has been removed, not likely to be converted into cash. So taking your quick assets, dividing with the current liability gives you 1.067, which is approximately 1.07. That makes B to be the correct option. Next, using the same data, or I think it's Exhibit 14, the financial leverage ratio for this company in December 2017. Financial leverage is equal to total assets upon total equity. We'll discuss in our ratio analysis in detail in a separate reading. So we didn't discuss this formula in today's reading, but nonetheless, all these readings are to be done simultaneously. Things missing here and there, they will level out in the future. So total assets upon total equity. Total assets, look at this for 2017. This is the number for your total assets, 42,497. And total equity is equity attributable to owners of the parent, 25. Total equities here, including the non-controlling interest, 25,540. We are calculating the financial leverage for the whole consolidated balance sheet, so it has to be total assets taken with the total equity, including the non-controlling interest. So dividing this 42497 with 25540 will give you 1.6639, which is approximately 1.66. B is the right answer. Now a bigger one. We have been given two companies' balance sheet and the sector average. These are all common sized balance sheet for company A, company B, and the sector average. And let us see what is needed first, and accordingly we look at the data given. It says, based on Exhibit 1, which statement is most likely correct? Company A's liquidity is below average liquidity for the whole sector. Comparing Company A liquidity with the sector average liquidity. This needs some serious computation. It will take time. But let us lay down the working, because there are certain subpart to this question, 31, 32, 33. So we just do working once. It will help us to solve other parts as well. So let us just lay down the workings first. And for that, we need different colored markers. And we have the arrangement for these, taking this one first. Now let us first calculate in a tabular form A, B, and the sector average. First he's talking about the liquidity, then solvency, then about the acquisition. Let us read and do each option separately and still save some time for other questions as well. So it says we need to first measure liquidity. Liquidity is measured through three measures, that is cash ratio, quick ratio and your current ratio. Let us do them all one by one. For company A, look at this. For company A, the cash ratio is 5. Let us just mark these and these. This blue will represent your, when we add the account receivables as well, it will give you the quick ratio. It must be given a separate color. Let's say a red one. And then in the current ratio, we will take all. We'll take this black one. Okay, first let's calculate the current ratio, the cash ratio first. That will take 5 plus 5, 10, 5 plus 0, 5, and 7 plus 2, 9. The denominator will be current liability for these 35, 25, and 28. The denominator will remain same for all. So it's going to be 35 for the first one, 25 for the second one. It'll take time, but somehow it will help you manage a question that's more data. Next item we have is the quick ratio, given in red. 5, 5, 5, 15. It'll be 15. 5 plus 15, 20. And then 7 plus 2 plus 12 gives you 21. Denominator for this would be same as well. 35, 35, and 35. The last one given in black one is 35 by 35. Current assets 35 in the black color. 35 by 35. 55 by 25. This one is 25, sorry, 25, and this one is 28. 55 by 25. And lastly, it's 48 by. We need this data for the next question also, so we're just taking this specific effort for the other parts as well. Now we have laid down the data. Let us compute these one by one. For company A, the cash ratio 10 by 35 is going to be 0.29. 5 by 25 is 0.20. 9 by 28 is 0.32. Quick ratio 15 by 35 given in red, it's 0.42 if I'm not wrong. 20 by 25 it's 0.80. And the sector average is 20 by 28, that's 0.75. The last one, current ratio 35 by 35 is 1 given in black. 55 by 25 it's 55 by 25. Let me calculate 55 by. It's 2.2. And 48 by 28, it's 1.75. Now let us draw the conclusions. Everything we need is here. Company A has below average liquidity risk. Company A has below average liquidity risk. Industry average is 0.32, it has 0.29. 0.75, 0.42. 1.751, all the three liquidity measures, since we were not sure which liquidity measure he is interested in, we have calculated all these three, right? And it is indicating in all these three measures, the liquidity risk for company A is above average. Risk is higher because it has less liquidity in all these three measures, cash, quick, as well as current ratio. So this is not the right option. The next option is company B has above average solvency risk. So it's basically company B versus the sector average. So we will use a range of measures. First, we will use the total debt ratio. Total debt ratio is basically total debt, that is current and non-current, divided by total debt and equity. So basically it's 55 by 100. So it will give you 0.55. 0.55 for B. And for the sector average, it is going to be 63 by 100. So 63 by 100, that will give you 0.63. Next, we'll use the long-term debt to equity ratio. So for company B, it is going to be 20 by 45. This is your long-term debt, 20 by 45. 20 by 45 will give you 0.44. And for the sector average, it's going to be 28 divided by 37, long-term debt to equity. So it will give you 0.76. So far as we can see, company B has low average risk compared to the sector average, 0.63 versus 0.55. 0.76 over point and versus 0.44. So let us try some other ratios as well. Let's take debt to equity. So for debt to equity, the total debt is 55. Equity is 45. So it will give you 1.22. For the sector average, it is 63 divided by 37. It's 1.70. Again, in this ratio, B has low average solvency risk. Let us try the financial leverage also. Financial leverage is equal to total assets divided by total equity. So total assets are 100. We take this number or this it makes. So it's 100 divided by 45. And for the sector average, it's going to be 100 divided by 37. So in this case, again, it is 2.22 versus 2.70. So as you can see, in all these measures, company B has proved to be below average solvency risk than the sector average. So that is wrong as well. It's a wrong option. All right, it says company A has made one or more acquisition. If you just look at the balance sheet of company A, if company A has made an acquisition, it should involve goodwill. If you just look at the non-current side of the non-current assets, there is 25 representing goodwill. This goodwill only arises if company A has acquired a subsidiary B, C, D or any other company. So this goodwill presence in the balance sheet of company A represents that it has made one or more acquisition, because goodwill on the parent is reported as a single number. So it might have acquired many subsidiaries and a single goodwill is reported, because goodwill on the parent's balance sheet, consolidated balance sheet, is reported as a single number. So this balance sheet single goodwill could be because of many subsidiaries. So company A has made one or more acquisition and goodwill is the result of those combinations. So that makes C to be the correct option, and we'll discuss it later. Next, the quick ratio for company A is closest to. Quick ratio. Quick ratio will involve just the assets that are easily convertible to cash, excluding the prepayments and inventory for company A. So this is 15. 15 divided by the current liabilities for company is 35. So 15 by 35, straightforward question, it will give you 0.43. Next, based on exhibit 1, the financial leverage ratio for company B is closest to what? Financial leverage is defined as the total assets divided by total equity for company B. Total assets are given here as 100 and total liabilities as 45. So simplifying this will give you 100 by 45 is 2.22. That will make C to be the correct option. Next, based on exhibit 1, which ratio indicates lower liquidity risk for company A compared with company B? Now we need that grid which we made up earlier. Alright, this is the grid we calculated for in the previous question. Exhibit 1, which ratio indicates lower liquidity risk for company A. Now look at this. We have three ratios: cash ratio, this is the first one; quick ratio, this is the second one; and current ratio, the third one. So which of these indicate company A showing lower liquidity risk? If you compare these two, A versus B, A has a better cash ratio, quick ratio, this is better for B, and the current ratio is also better for B. So comparing just on cash ratio, just cash versus cash ratio, company A appears to be having lower liquidity risk than company B. So other these ratios, quick ratio and cash ratio, they are not comparatively good. B has a better quick ratio and the current ratio, whereas cash ratio is better for A. So it means compared to A versus B, A has low liquidity risk for cash ratio. That makes A to be the correct option. And that completes your EOC.